Well, it would be nice for us to say to you, just get in the vortex and stay there. The end. It would be nice for us to say, get into that receiving mode where you can clearly hear and receive guidance and impulses so that you can always be in the right place at the right time. But it's also right for us to say to you, and good for you to hear, that you are where you are. And asking yourself to be in a different financial situation or even in a different emotional state is not really a very productive way to go about it. It would be like saying to you, just jump over the house. And you would say, okay, but you don't have the ability or the facility right now to just jump over the house. And so there's something very beneficial about stopping right where you are in your tension, in your physical discomfort, in your emotional discomfort, in your even argument with someone. Stop right where you are once you're aware that you're not feeling good, and just acknowledge that you are where you are, and that's all right. And this is the way we would soothe it if we were standing in your physical shoes. You're always on your way somewhere. You are an eternal being, and there's never going to be a time that you're just done and not doing something more. So more is always going to be unfolding for you. And this is the piece that specifically we want you to hear right here and now. If you're standing here and where you want to be is over here, there's a path from where you are to where you want to be. And your inner being knows what that logical path is. So when we say path of least resistance, we're really saying path of most logic. We're saying most likely path for you to take. We're not saying path of you overcoming the stupid resistance that you've put down, even though every bit of resistance that is on your path you have put there. But your source is not condemning or judging resistance on your path. Your source is not judging where you stand, because the source within you understands that you're always going to be standing in a place lesser than where you now intend to be, because you're an eternal being always on your way somewhere. Does that make sense to you? So if you would give yourself a break, lighten up on yourself about not feeling comfortable right where you are, and instead say, all right, it is what it is. I am where I am. Now what? You would be much more likely to hear the next logical, reasonable encouragement for you. Now we want to amplify that just a little bit more here. So as you are on your way to some place that you want to be, sometimes the path isn't clear because you have beliefs that are in the way. Well, those beliefs are not just going to go away because somebody says those beliefs are in your way. They're beliefs that you've put into place bit by bit. They are thoughts that you continue to think. They are thoughts that continue to come up because other things remind you of those thoughts. They are active thoughts which now represent active resistance in your way. Can you accept that? So now imagine your inner being seeing you standing where you are, loving you standing where you are, feeling your worthiness standing where you are, who is now evaluating the whole thing. Here's where you are, here's where you want to be, and these are the beliefs that you currently hold that are keeping you from where you want to be. Are you still with us? So your loving inner being is not saying to you, get rid of those beliefs. Your loving inner being is saying, if you will come this way, you will come to understand the belief that you hold more clearly than you ever have before. If you will come this way. In other words, sometimes your inner being is actually calling you on what we are insisting is always the path of least resistance, right into something that might initially feel a little worse for you, because it's giving you an opportunity to acknowledge, hey, wait a minute, I've got some patterns going on here. I've got some things that have been happening, and that pattern relative to that has dissipated. So maybe this pattern relative to this can dissipate too. Because your inner being cannot think for you. Your inner being cannot just wipe away the resistance that's on your trail. But what your inner being can do is shine a light on the resistance, a loving light on the resistance, a loving, benevolent light on the resistance, no condemnation, no judging, just it is what it is, but here's a way around it, and here's another way around it, and maybe you might want to not be so hard on yourself about this and that and the other. And so you just leave those pieces of resistance right where they are. You just move on from them. You don't wrestle them to the ground and kill them. You don't try to understand them ad nauseum. You just accept that that was something that I used to think that no longer applies, that my inner being doesn't think, that doesn't serve me to think it, and I don't need to think it anymore, so I'm just moving on. How about that? So we like to talk about how sometimes there are those rumble strips on the side of the road, and whether it is day or night, when you get on them because you're not really focused or whatever, or maybe someone has crowded you, but when you feel that rumble strip, you know that you are approaching the edge of your lane. And you intuitively know what to do about it. In other words, you don't have to come to an Abraham seminar in order to figure out what you should do in a case like that. You just correct your steering just a little bit and put yourself more comfortably in your lane. But if you don't, if you pretend like you don't know what the rumble strip means, and you get 2 wheels on the other side of it, or 4 wheels on the other side of it, now you're off in the grass a little bit, and then you're off in the weeds or the mud or off the bridge or whatever. It becomes less and less convenient the further off the road you get. Have you noticed? You can get a new body anytime you want one. It's just time consuming. It's time consuming. It takes a long time to grow up and for your parents to let you do what you want to do, in other words. And so the more awareness you have about this guidance, this rumble strip, then the sooner you can correct your version of life that you are creating. And the more aware you are of that rumble strip, and the sooner that you make some corrective action or thought, then the less likely it is to get worse and worse and worse and worse. By downplaying the things that aren't working, while you are upplaying the things that are working, not only do you practice vibrations that enhance your own point of attraction, but you become more aware in those moments when you're not doing it. Sensitivity to emotion is your greatest strength, because when you are aware that something is out of whack emotionally, then you don't have to get into the stronger out of whackness of a sore back or a headache or a. The more aware you are of the early stages of resistance, then the easier it is to hold yourself in that place of greater intuitiveness and greater guidance. But it doesn't matter. Because the fact of it is, you can bring yourself back from any resistance. You can leave any resistance on your trail behind you. So that's really what we are wanting to offer to you, is that if you are aware that sometimes you create by default, in other words, you let beliefs that you don't even realize that are active within you take over, then that contrasting experience might cause you to say, I think I will be more deliberate about my life experience. I think I will be more aware of the segments of my day. So you say things to yourself such as, I have an inner being who has a broader view, who is aware of me at all times. So now you've made these general statements about who you are, about your wisdom, about your connection, about your intention. I like to be safe. I like to be efficient. I like to move about effectively. So now you've set all of that in motion. There is a sort of vibrational roadway that you've prepared. You've sent energy out ahead of you to prepave the road before you. Now, you could stop if you'd planned ahead for that a little bit, take a minute or 2 or 3, and just breathe, settle yourself in, and then say to yourself something like, I expect this to be a very nice experience. You might even address your own inner being by saying, you guys ready to go? Because they always are. The question is, are you ready to be ready for us all going with you? In other words, how tuned in you are. And so if you've prepaved just that much, which would not take that much time, you'd find yourself being aware. Your intuitiveness, your sensitivity to your surroundings is the most important thing that we are wanting you all to learn how to tune to, because your inner being knows where you are in relationship to everyone else, and most of all in relationship to your intentions in this moment. But let's be real for just a moment, just a tiny little moment. Most of you don't give much thought to anything other than just getting on with where you're going. And so you have to put up with your absence of pre-paving. Now, it's not that the pre-paving hasn't taken place, because your inner being is always doing that pre-paving for you. Didn't know that, did you? You have a guidance system that knows where you're planning on going and knows the route that you're planning on taking and has a very clear, very decided opinion or perspective about what you've decided to do. So when you feel uneasiness about what you've decided to do, it's worth stopping and thinking, what's this uneasiness about? Perhaps my inner being has a different opinion about it than I do. So sit with the intention of settling in. Utilize your guidance system. You see, there's just no excuse to have guidance that you are not tapping into. And there's no excuse to not have a good time all the time, because you have the ability to do that if you just understand all of the ramifications of your moment in time. Make sense to you? We've been using an analogy about staying in your lane, because we've noticed that if you would tune in to where you are right now, not somebody else's now, your now where you are right here and now, moving from place to place, that is a really great opportunity for you to receive those impulses. You have guidance. Every one of you has that guidance. Not many of you are tapping into it deliberately, but you could. And we want to remind you that you have much more control over your experience than you know. If you will try not to control things that are not happening in your now, then every one of your nows will go better. You see what we're getting at? Esther would say from time to time, people are so mean. And Jerry would say every time she said that, not all of them. Or people just don't think about what they're doing. Not all of them. The more you say those things, the more you identify a vibration that causes the universe to only be able to give you those things, because your whole trail, your whole path is dotted with those beliefs. So almost everywhere you go, some of those beliefs have to manifest in your experience, you see. So your inner being will bring you along. And once you find yourself in a pattern of things where a whole bunch of things are showing themselves to you, it's a good time for you to say, oh, I get it. I get it. I am the common denominator here. I'm everywhere I go. Because those things along your trail follow you on your vibrational path. Because if something's bothering you today, it's going to go with you everywhere you go. And so we think it's a wonderful thing when experiences can cause you to say, wait a minute, this is not who I am. I don't yell at people. I don't understand what that person is living. I don't know what's going on in the tension of their life experience, but I do know what's going on in my life, and I do know that I have the ability to have the shock absorbers to behave in the way that, or to feel a way that causes me to behave in the way that I really am wanting to behave. It's not about your behavior. It's about what came before your behavior. And what came before your behavior are the thoughts and feelings and vibrations over which you have more control than you often exercise. Because if you are waiting until you're shouting at someone, well, the shouting has already happened. And sometimes the repercussions of that can be unpleasant in the moment too. But the more you are aware of the way you are feeling, this is the thing that we want you to hear above all other things. Every time you feel an outburst of negative emotion, whether you verbalize it or not, you have clarified your vortex. Your vortex has now become something more than it was before. And now your inner being has more information to guide you and inspire you more to who you want to be, you see.